All right, this week's edition of Class 3A here on the Arkansas Sports Network for the ASN Ranking Show. I'm Carson Ward. Not really. There's only been one change across the entirety of the Class 3A rankings, and it was at number 10. Mansfield replaced Center Point after Center Point's loss last week. So we'll get into all that in a second. Before we do, go ahead and make sure you are subscribed to us here on YouTube. We are just a few subscribers away from reaching the magical 100,000 mark on all of our platforms. So go ahead and subscribe to us here on YouTube, or follow us. Follow us on Facebook, X, and Instagram. We are very excited about what the future holds here at the Arkansas Sports Network, and we want everyone to be a part of it. So go ahead, follow and subscribe and everything like that if you have not already. We are going to go ahead and just get into the rankings here. Number one, Prescott. Prescott's been a team that really has impressed me so far this season. They're going to have a very tough challenge as undefeated Bismarck calls their number this week. They'll head. We'll have that game covered for you as our ASN game of the week this week. It should be a really interesting game, and we are really excited to be able to cover that one and bring it to you on the Arkansas Sports Network. Friday at 7 p.m. You can catch that game on our Facebook and YouTube. Neither team has a live stream, so the Arkansas Sports Network is the only place that you can get access to that game. So we were really excited, hoping to hit that 100,000 followers / subscriber mark pretty soon after that game. As for Prescott, Prescott has so many dynamic playmakers. It's going to be hard to stop if you're Bismarck, and I'll talk about the game later. But Prescott has so many weapons that it's hard to stop for anybody. Bismarck may be the team that does it, but I do think that they're going to be in a high scoring game this week. I think Prescott's got so much tradition in that program. And they've been the favorite pretty much since the offseason. I think that Prescott's, even if they lose this week, they're still going to be a serious contender. Had some struggles earlier in the season. I remember Salem gave them a run for their money, and when we covered their game against Falk, they just ran away with it. I don't think that's going to be the case this week. I think we're going to be in for a very competitive game. But we'll go ahead and move on to our number 2 team, the Boonville Bearcats. Boonville, the defending state champions, and it's just the only thing that really puts Prescott over them at this point is the preseason hype. With all the preseason hype that Prescott had, and with Boonville losing Dax Goff, people thought that Prescott would be the one to step up and take the crown. Now we may have a rematch of our state championship last year between those two teams. We will just have to see how the rest of the season unfolds. But we've got another team that played in the state championship game last year at our number 3 spot, the Rivercrest Colts, who played in the 4A state title game against Harding Academy last season, and neither one of those teams are still in that class. Rivercrest with Cavante Washington and Jaden Young and so many talented players on that team for Coach Fleming. They're making it happen right now. I think Rivercrest is going to be a team that's going to have a really strong chance down the stretch. They've got so many weapons, to kind of run wild with, and I think that they're gonna have some challengers, but I think that their win over Newport a couple weeks ago was really impressive, and obviously they have remained in our top 10 throughout the entire season. Number 4, Fordyce. Fordyce is a team that, of course, as I mentioned before, our very own Duran Miller was very high on, and he mentioned that last season they came within a point of Prescott. And then, of course, with the true freshman quarterback, I say true freshman, I'm thinking about college terms. He's a freshman quarterback, Cadillac Ellison. He's one of those guys that's prodigy, like you might see a true freshman like a Trevor Lawrence or a Caleb Williams or something like that in the college game. He's kind of who that makes me think of. He's got all the natural talent in the world, um, and with all the athletes that Fordyce routinely has, they're going to be a serious contender for Class 3A for the next 4 years for as long as he's their quarterback. Number five, Bismarck and Ben Keithley's crew. Of course, he's the name that people always bring up, and Coach DJ Keithley over at Bismarck. I only mention I mentioned Ben Keithley because he is one of the leaders of that team as their quarterback. He's been there, knows the system, knows what Coach Keithley, his dad, will expect from that unit. Um, I think that I think that Bismarck is going to, we had them earlier in the season when they played Mansfield. I think um, Bismarck's really going to show what they're made of this week against Prescott. If they can pull off a victory against Prescott, it's hard to not put them at number one or number two, um, because of how high everybody's been on Prescott so far this season. Even since the offseason started, it's going to be hard for us not to jump Bismarck a lot of spots because they're undefeated and they just knocked off the number one team. The rankings, if that were to happen, would get pretty creative and pretty crazy uh, next week. Um, so, going to be really interesting to see how things play out in that matchup. Number six, Osceola have not moved from their previous spot, similar to all these teams except for Mansfield. Osceola is a team that I think is going to be really exciting down the stretch, and we're going to see what they can do um, against some of the better teams in Class 3A when it comes playoff time. Number seven, Mayflower. This is a team that I was really high on in the offseason after talking to Coach Emerson for our hometown sports football preview. Um, he mentioned uh, that he felt like they were going to be a serious contender uh, to go to Little Rock this season. I don't remember if that was on camera or not, but I do remember him being super excited about his team this year and the advantage he felt like he had moving down from 4A to 3A. He felt like this is the spot where his team needed to be successful. They've got a tremendous line of scrimmage. They've got a tremendous backs, and they've got tremendous coaching from Coach Emerson and the rest of his staff. I think that they're going to be a serious contender down the stretch, as was my expectation in the offseason. Number eight, Ryzen. 3A is deep as it gets this season. Ryzen is a team that uh, we really weren't expecting to come out and have a huge year this year, and they have. They've proved us all wrong. Ryzen is a team with a lot of history, and I know that in a couple of weeks when they play Fordyce, um, that's going to be one for the books. But for now, it's hard. It's hard. Of course, it's hard to not get caught up in that game. But for now, we're just going to have to focus. They're going to have to focus on taking it day by day, week by week, prior to that game. And once it gets to that game, the energy is going to be high, um, and things are going to be tense. But for now, I think Rise is just going to have to take things one step at a time, and I think they're going to have a very successful season when it comes down to it in the playoffs. Number nine, Newport. This is another team that I have been really high on ever since I saw them uh, play Class 2A Mark Tree, who at the time I was actually much higher on than I am now. Um, Newport is a team with such a loaded backfield; it's hard to stop. Now that can create some problems as well of who's going to get the ball which play, especially for the defense, but offensive, for the Newport as well, that can create some problems. Um, I do think it's more of an advantage than a disadvantage for sure. And Keandre Baker being as talented as he is, Newport is one of the wild card teams in the class. Um, Lost to Rivercrest earlier this season. Of course, that's been a huge part of their ranking and their record. I do think they're going to have a very fantastic season. I do think if they played Rivercrest again, they could win, especially if it was at home. With how close that game ended up being, don't count out Newport just yet. Number 10, Mansfield and Coach Overton. This is a team that we saw very early in the season play against Bismarck. Got beat that day, but they showed that they can compete with the best that the class has to offer. Don't sleep on Mansfield just yet. So 24 games this week in Class 3A, and we are going to give out some picks for each and every one of them, starting with Boonville and Mansfield. This, if it wasn't for Prescott and Bismarck, would probably be the game of the week in Class 3A. Boonville, undefeated 7-0, Mansfield 5-2. Very exciting game. Both teams love to run the ball. Um, I do think Boonville gets the victory in this game. It's at Mansfield. That's going to benefit them tremendously. I think that Mansfield will give them all they can handle and maybe then some. But I do think Boonville will end up pulling it out at the end of the day. Quitman versus Atkins. Atkins is a team that has 2 losses this season by a combined 4 points. 3-point loss to Conway Christian, 1-point loss to Melbourne. I'm going to pick Atkins to get the victory this week. I've been able to watch both of these teams play in person. I think that Atkins is a much better team than Quitman. Plus, the game is at Atkins. I think Coach Dobbs and company get the victory this week. Glen Rose versus Cutter Morning Star. Glen Rose is a team that really surprised me with how dominant they were in their game against Perryville that likely decided the conference champion last week. Now, we don't want to don't want to count things before they happen. But Glen Rose this week with a victory over Cutter Morning Star moves one step closer to a conference championship. I'm going to pick the Beavers to win in this one. Harrisburg versus Hoxie. Harrisburg 1-6, Hoxie 3-4. I think Hoxie gets the victory this week and they get to 500. Mayflower versus Episcopal. This is going to be one step closer to Mayflower potentially. And that game against Melbourne might have been the one. They're going to have a tough matchup at the end of the season against Atkins. But I do think they move one step closer to finishing the regular season undefeated this week with a victory over Episcopal. Two Rivers versus Perryville. Perryville is going to need a bounce back victory this week after a loss to Glen Rose. Perryville, I think, is still a serious contender. They got so many playmakers. Connor Frith is the leader of that team on both sides of the ball, really. One of the most talented players in the entire class. And Coach Fairbanks was very excited about his team when I talked to him in the offseason, and rightly so. I think they moved to 6-2 and get back on track. Smackover versus Parker's Chapel. Smackover 3-4, Parker's Chapel 1-6. I think Smackover is better than their record reflects. I remember they had a tough loss to Junction City earlier in the year that could have easily gone their way. But I am going to pick Smackover to win this week and get to 500. Walnut Ridge versus Newport. This should be an interesting game. Walnut Ridge is a team that we were really high on in the offseason. Same with Newport. And Walnut Ridge, going to Newport is going to be tough, so I'm going to pick the Greyhounds to win this week. Yellville Summit versus Melbourne. Melbourne looking like the 2 seed out of that conference, and I think they get the victory decisively over Yellville Summit this week. Palestine Wheatley versus McGee. Palestine Wheatley 2-4, McGee 4-3. I'm going to pick McGee to get the victory this week. They've got a lot of really good pieces to that puzzle. I think McGee ends up getting the victory this week over a struggling Palestine Wheatley team. Manila versus Piggott. Manila is struggling this year, but Piggott struggling even more. I am going to pick Manila to get the victory in this game. Magnet Cove versus Paris. 4-3 Magnet Cove, 3-4 Paris. I'm going to pick Paris to get the victory because it's at Paris this week. Would not be shocked in the least if Magnet Cove ended up winning that one. Hackett versus Lavaca. Hackett 2-5, Lavaca 3-4. I am going to pick Lavaca to get the win this week because the game is at Lavaca. Hackett's struggles will continue. Greenland versus West Fork. Greenland is a team that has come out and played pretty well against the teams that they should have played well against. I am going to pick them to get the victory over West Fork this week. Falk versus Horatio. Falk is a team that started off the season really hot. They've struggled to get things to stay on track ever since their loss to Prescott. I am going to pick Falk, though, to get the victory this week on the road against Horatio. Fordyce versus Dumas. Fordyce undefeated at 7-0, Dumas at 3-4. I am going to pick the Redbugs to win in dominant fashion this week over Dumas. Cedarville versus Charleston. Cedarville is a team that has really struggled this season, off to a 1-6 start. Charleston and coach Ricky May off to a 4-3 start. I am going to pick Charleston to get the victory this week at home. Harmony Grove, Ouachita County versus Center Point. I'm going to pick Harmony Grove, Ouachita County to get the victory in what some might call an upset pick. I think that they are a very talented team. I've thought that ever since they played Junction City earlier in the season. I'm going to pick them to get the victory this week over Center Point. Prescott versus Bismarck, our game of the week. I won't be on the call for this game, so I am going to go ahead and pick Prescott to get the victory this week. Bismarck will keep it extremely close. Again, one of these games where I would not be shocked if Bismarck ended up pulling it off and getting the victory this week. I think that it's going to be a very, very tight and contested game between these two teams, but I do think that Prescott will end up pulling it off. Barton versus Drew Central. I am going to pick Barton to get the victory in this game and move to one step closer to 500. Jessieville versus Danville. I'm going to pick Jessieville to get the victory. Danville's a team that under Coach Crane obviously has gotten better every week, and they're going to be a program that's going to get better year over year with Coach Crane being there. I'm going to pick Jessieville to get the victory this week, and Danville's struggles for this season at least are going to continue. Rivercrest versus Osceola. This is a very, very interesting game. Osceola, they're our number 6 team. Rivercrest, our number 3 team. This game will 100% shake up the rankings no matter who wins. The game is at Osceola, which I think benefits them tremendously. I am going to pick the Rivercrest Colts, though, to win this game. Mountain View versus Salem. I'm going to pick Salem to get the win in decisive fashion this week at home. I don't think there's going to be too much contention with that pick. Risen versus Lakeside. Risen will get the victory this week and move to 8-0. And they're going to set up a tough showdown with Fordyce coming up. Well, that's going to do it for this week for the Class 3A edition of the ASN Ranking Show. Again, don't forget to subscribe, like the video if you're enjoying this content. Leave a comment if there's something that you want us to know about a player or a team. Other than that, go ahead and follow us on our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and X, at AR Sportsnet. I'm Carson Ward, host of the ASN Ranking Show, for now, signing off.